Thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey guys, Joe Klemczewski, founder of the Diet Doc, and I've got a pretty awesome special feature for you in that we have Brianna Mosher, one of our program owners up in Maine, who agreed to do a little interview. She has some questions about metabolism as she's kind of sorting out different paths for clients, and we know everybody has different genetic capacities for metabolism, and there is so much misinformation out there that I thought this would be a great opportunity to share this information. So without further ado, let me introduce Brianna, and we're going to go ahead and roll through with the interview. So Brianna, thank you for agreeing to do this.
Oh, thank you for giving me the time to pick your brain and talk through everything. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say because I've been kind of racking my brain about one particular client, which is spurring for me that maybe I'm fundamentally missing something about metabolism and working with clients. So
I doubt it, but there, like I said, is a lot of myths and so forth circulating, especially now more than ever it seems. So it's perfectly appropriate, and I think it's a question that a lot of people have.
Yeah, there's so many myths, and as I was doing my own research on, trying to figure out where this person is at and how to help them, there was evidence everywhere on how to support either side of it. Mm-hmm. So it was really confusing. So anyway, I'm just excited to have the clarity and understanding.
Well, and just a little bit of background, I know you are getting ready to graduate. So in your emphasis in working with clients, of course you love the physiology, but you're also engaged a lot in the psychological aspect. So tell me just a little bit about what you're doing there and why you want to bring kind of the combination of both things to clients.
Psychology is definitely my passion, and I found that, at least in the short experience that I've had working with clients so far, I've learned so much because most people already know what to do. They know what types of foods are good for them and how to fuel their bodies, and a lot of people know should eat less than what they're burning and the basics, but they don't implement it. So the funnest thing for me has been to use my skills from my psychology classes and my degree to help them with behavior change and understanding what's motivating them. And a lot of the videos that Corey does are super helpful for me, and I can relate them back to material that I've been learning. So developing that mindset piece to lead to behavior change, I think, is the key, at least for me at this point.
Right, absolutely. Well, we love having you as part of our Diet Doc family, so can't say that enough about people like you who come on board with such great skills and just passion to help people. So let's dig in and teach everybody about metabolism.
I appreciate that. So yeah, so hopefully the end result will be that I can help this person more. So basically what's happened is I have a 25-year-old female. She's around 5'8", and when she came to me, she was about like 163 pounds, and over 14 weeks, now she's only at 157.5. So it's 4.5 pounds over 14 weeks, which is, at least to me, seems pretty slow. Mm-hmm. So when she first came to me, her average intake was around 1,100 calories. She was eating like 80 grams of protein, 60 grams of fat, and 80 carbs every day. And working out 6 days a week for an hour with a lot of cardio and a lot of lifting. So it was hard for me to set her intake so low, but she wanted to lose weight. So I wanted her to be around like 120 protein, 120 carbs, and 40 fat, and hopefully walk her back up a little bit. But she tends to just stick right at that level. Now she's eating 80 grams of protein and 80 to 100 grams of carbs and 30 to 35 grams of fat. So she's at a pretty low intake and still working out 6 to 7 days a week. And now she started doing spin classes, which are really high intensity for like 50 minutes, 5 or 6 times a week. So her weight isn't moving, and if it is, it's like a half a pound maybe, or like a quarter of a pound. And I can't seem to figure out why. So one of my theories that I brought to you was, or not my theories, but something I've heard, is that people who are over-exercising, specifically with aerobic activity like cardio bunnies, they're increasing their cortisol to such a high level that it hinders their fat loss. So I was wondering what your take was on that.
Okay. Well, let me back up a little bit as I was kind of taking notes on the process that you've engaged on with your client. And you know, I always in my mind go through a series of checks when I have a client who's struggling to lose a lot. I want to engage them in this fact-finding mission, and then kind of filter it through, you know, normal physiology, the things we know about the ranges of metabolic capacity for people genetically, even health and medical compromise that might need to be, you know, looked at. And then, you know, just kind of checking off the list of things that I would run through to try and find where there are any glitches, anything that we can do to make the progress faster for the client. So, you know, first of all, looking at genetic metabolism, the misnomer that's just really, really grand in the industry is that there's just a magical number of calories that everybody should be able to consume. And because nutrition fact panels are arbitrarily set at 2,000 calories a day, that's kind of what got into the pop literature a long time ago. So you'll even read things to this day that say, well, you know, you should never eat lower than 2,000 calories a day, less than 2,000 calories. And it's just not true. The best studies have shown the average male and female metabolism are both below that, and females are even under 1,500, and that's just to maintain. So to lose weight, you have to look at that, first of all, as the bell curve, and then realize that 20 to 30% of people are on the high and low end of even that middle point. So it's absolutely not uncommon for some women to have to eat 1,000 calories a day or less, you know, hopefully more, but I've certainly had clients eating 750, 800, 900 calories a day, and that's just what they have to do. And I've had clients lose more than 100 pounds a year and maintain it doing that. But that's somebody who, you know, doesn't have the greatest activity level, probably is hypothyroid, has a little bit of reduced metabolic capacity from age. So always consider that when somebody comes to you and they've had trouble losing weight themselves, there probably is some kind of genetic component to that, or they probably don't need to seek our services. So immediately you're going to probably put her in that category where she's just going to have a slow metabolism. Then my first question to her would always be, you know, have you had blood work? Is your thyroid okay? Testosterone, estrogen, those kinds of things. Maybe not even just a quick check by a general practitioner, but seeing an endocrinologist to really dive into, you know, thyroid stimulating hormone, T3, T4, all of those individually. So that's something that I would consider, make sure that she has done that. But, you know, to your question, I want to save your specific question, if I can, on cardio, just for a minute to get through some of this information. But the other thing that I consider is, you know, looking at their objectivity. So this is something that's very difficult to discuss with people because you don't want them to feel like you're accusing them of dishonesty. But I know, because as a professional bodybuilder, I've dieted for 20 years, and there are times that things were going really, really well, and other times mentally I'm just not into it, and I'm sneaking extra bites, or I might eat a little bit more and then say, well, I'll just do a little extra cardio tomorrow, and pretty soon the accuracy and the objectivity is just not there. I've had just dozens and dozens of clients in the last 2 to 3 decades who would swear up and down that everything they're doing is textbook perfect, and then at the end of the year they would say, oh, by the way, I was binging and purging like crazy and just not telling you, or I was eating, you know, one client was, you know, eating 5 boxes of Tic Tacs every day, which came out to like 150 grams of sugar, or all these things, sometimes just very honest mistakes, you know, misweighing a certain food, or being lulled into thinking fact panels are always accurate, and they can be far from accurate. So I always have to make sure we cover that base. You know, are you tracking, weighing, measuring everything to the T? So, you know, that's something I look at. And then, you know, maybe even before I would ever reduce calories, look at the quality of every food. I just was emailing a couple clients and saying, hey, look, you know, everything is fine here, but we really need more structure. That's another misnomer. A lot of people think flexible dieting is the end all of everything. Like that's the pinnacle to reach. And if you want consistency and predictability, sometimes you need a lot more structure than you need flexibility. So I would look at your client's food logs, and if she's eating, you know, all different times of the day and different meal sizes and different foods, different meal or food sources, as I just emailed a client, I said, hey, look, let's pick a breakfast that you can eat every single day. Breakfast doesn't change. Let's do a mid-morning and a mid-afternoon snack that doesn't change at all. And then lunch and dinner, we're going to set some parameters. So you're going to have 4 or 5 ounces of lean protein at lunch, 5 or 6 at dinner. You're going to have this much starch, this much fiber. But you can choose. You know, the flexibility, quote unquote, comes from you get to pick the source. You get to, you know, fluctuate the amount just a little bit. But, you know, that gives us, especially with somebody who's having a difficult time losing, at least enough structure that we're limiting the variables and the moving parts, and we can really see if that helps. And I'm telling you, Brianna, this happens every time I've had a difficult client or one of our program owners at the Diet Doc struggles and brings me a case. If I just tell them, look, ask your client what foods they like, what meals would be acceptable, and let's make an exact meal plan. This is the antithesis of flexible dieting, but sometimes you have to go all the way back to the basics. So in that scenario, if a client is willing to eat the same thing, even with no flexibility, like I just mentioned for breakfast and dinner, you're just going to eat these meals every day, same amount, same times for 1 week. Could you do that for me? And most clients would say, of course I can. That's what I hired you for. I want you to tell me exactly what to eat. And without fail, every single client I've ever done that with starts losing like crazy. And that just shows me that we eliminated all of the opportunity for inaccuracy. You know, hopefully they were even motivated to just, you know, be extra careful with their own weighing and measuring and tracking. But then we can build back into more flexibility. So I want to make sure that our conversation as we move forward to this, Brianna, is running on those 2 tracks simultaneously. We need to look at metabolic capacity. We need to look at what their genetic limitations might be. Maybe there is some health or medical issues to sort through. But then there's the behavior, which I know is your forte, and you know, let's make sure they do have the right mindset in terms of, you know, they're doing this for themselves. It's not what can I get away with in terms of being inaccurate, but you know, I want to learn how to be the most accurate and the most effective so we can take them through all those steps that lead to sustainability. So I'm going to pitch this back to you in a second. I just wanted to get some of that kind of groundwork in. And now to your question about too much cortisol. In response to your initial question, I sent you a picture from a World War II concentration camp, and it was the safest picture. I mean, most of these pictures were just piles of hundreds or thousands of corpses, and they all weighed about 60 pounds at the time of death. And my question to you is, you know, point out the person in here who's overweight because their metabolism was, quote, damaged or had stalled. Or maybe, I mean, you think this person has stress, or you and I have stress. How about, you know, working in a concentration camp knowing you're going to die? That's stress, and yet they still seem to lose weight. And I would venture to say that they were doing more exercise, quote unquote, than somebody doing 6 or 7 days, you know, in a gym. So, you know, in the overall scheme of things, that argument fails, that you have too much cortisol so you can no longer lose weight. That just doesn't work. But could you, with more rest and less exercise, be a little bit more effective? And the answer is absolutely. One study I read, for example, showed that if you slept 5 hours or less per night, you had a 67% higher rate of obesity. And in other studies that sorted that out a little bit more cleanly, it shows that, as you're describing, when cortisol is reduced, when overall immunity is increased because sleep patterns are better, then your metabolism does increase. But there's kind of a range of healthy, normal metabolism, and then a bottom end of you at your worst, what that would be like. And it's not enough to make somebody not lose weight, so I think there are some other things at play. But with your client, I would certainly address that. Let's not do 4 hours of cardio a day. Let's make sure we're getting the right, most effective types and ways of doing cardio. Make sure you're definitely getting enough sleep. Worry about overall health. Those things definitely matter, Brianna. You know that as much as anybody. But then we also have to go back and look at overall just food intake and structure. So everything that I said there about the differences between structure and flexibility and accuracy and all of that, what comes to mind with your client? What steps do you think you could kind of lead her toward next?
The first thing I think of is the meal plan, because you and I had talked about that before. And we actually set her up on that several weeks ago. I went through that process with her and made her, 3 different meal plans or 2 different meal plans with all the foods that she liked, but more starchy carbohydrates because she had a lot of fiber. So when we switched her to that, she did really well and started to lose a little bit more. And then I think she just got off track because of holidays and wasn't able, obviously, to follow the meal plan through Christmas and New Year's and everything. But she's been back on it the last couple weeks, and I haven't seen the movement. So I'm wondering if, to go to your point of consistency, I'm wondering if there are some days where she just doesn't follow it, and if that's enough to make the difference. Following her meal plan 4 days a week, and then 3 days a week she's eating a protein bar and then 800 calories at night. Right. That's enough to keep her from losing weight loss. Is that right?
Yeah, so if you go back to, in every piece of curriculum we've ever published, I always make sure that the center of it is a description of what I call metabolic positioning. And to your point, if somebody is doing great, they're losing weight, the first sources of energy that we use as kind of cellular go-to energy is blood sugar, whatever is immediately in the presence of cells. It could even be fatty acids, amino acids in your bloodstream, but dominantly our cells are looking for carbohydrates in the form of glucose, so we'll churn through that. Then we'll start using liver and muscle glycogen, which is stored carbohydrate. And as we lose that or use that energy, then we start using a higher percent of body fat. And you almost have to deplete those carbohydrates slowly, but you reach a certain point where then you increase the amount of reliance your body has on stored body fat. And this is triggered by kind of the hormonal balance between glucagon and insulin. Insulin being the hormone that helps you store energy, glucagon retrieves it. But it's not just a simply linear, equitable proposition. Biologically, all these things are happening at once, and you're dealing with percentages. But when you get to certain points, you trigger thresholds where your body, adapts, basically, is the best way of saying it. So if I'm in the necessary position of converting body fat to energy, my body is ramping up production of things like glucagon so that I can do it quicker, easier, more efficiently. So I'm literally better at burning body fat. If I'm going back and forth, up and down, then my body's never in that flux. So we often say that you can lose weight up to 50% faster eating the same amount of calories just because you reach that metabolic threshold, that metabolic position, and you stay there. It would be like this. Let's say I eat well for 3 or 4 days, and I'm at that place. My body's burning body fat the fastest, easiest possible. I'm locked in. My endocrine system is working to my best advantage. And then I go out and I eat an extra 2,000 calories. And so I refill all those glycogen stores in my body. Now I have to use all of that energy first before I start using body fat. So you can go up and down. It takes you 3 or 4 days to start losing body fat that effectively, and then in one bad meal you can put yourself back at the starting point where it takes another 3 or 4 days of really hard work to get back to that point. So you could really effectively be dieting perfectly 90 to 95% of the week and still not losing weight because you just keep refilling those glycogen stores. So, that's a really big thing. That's why we always start with that in our curriculum. And it has to be just that consistent. I was talking to another one of our program owners who is helping a client, and for this challenge, first of the year, kind of a challenge, she's doing almost kind of a fast where she only eats 1 meal a day. And this is kind of the contest. You're supposed to do this for 3 weeks. Everybody's doing it this way. And so she was losing 1 pound a day, just bam, 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 the first 7 or 8 days, just 1 pound a day, every day. And that's working through that stored glycogen because carbohydrates retain so much water. So you use that glycogen, stored carbohydrates, and your body releases that water. Well, his question was, well, now she's only losing, hardly anything, maybe 1 pound, pound and a half a week. And I said, well, that's not hardly anything, because if a female can only utilize about 1,500 calories a day, let's just say that's the average, if she was eating nothing at all, you could at maximum lose 3 pounds of body fat a week. I mean, that's maximum, eating 0 calories for an entire week. So we get so lulled into thinking it's normal to go through that kind of carbohydrate and water purge. Oh, I lost 10 pounds my first week. Then we only lose 1 or 2 and we think it's nothing. But for somebody like your client who is struggling to lose 1/4 of a pound or 1/2 a pound a week, if we got her locked into that metabolic position of maximum efficiency, I'll bet she could lose 3/4 to 1 pound a week. But that might be all she can lose, because with somebody who might have, clinical or subclinical hypothyroidism, she just might end up, her normal metabolic rate, BMR, might be 1,200 calories. So you take 500 or 600 away from that. Now she's eating under 1,000 calories a day and barely losing 1 pound. That's not the fastest of any human being on the planet, but that might be her best, her fastest. And the way she can maximize that is just to be that consistent. So to your point of her losing a little bit quicker, then hitting the holidays and a little bit of a slump, and now she's losing again, that's exactly what I would consider normal. I mean, I know clients who go through the holidays, I just know what to expect that next day. Everybody's going to be up a little bit, and we're going to have to work, the week to get through all of that newly stored glycogen. Mm-hmm. But what are your thoughts? You and I both agreed on there's so much misinformation out there. What do you have to combat with your own clients in terms of what they hear about, oh, hey, I have, quote, metabolic damage, or my metabolism just doesn't work anymore? I mean, how do you combat those kind of discussions?
That's a really good question, and I don't know, because everyone's so different. For this particular client, she tends to hold on to a lot of those old myths, and she has a history of disordered eating in the past, so it's difficult for me to explain to her the benefits of having more carbs in your diet and things like that. So she tends to be someone who kind of exercises almost neurotically. And she'll do the structure just like you're suggesting until she won't, and then she goes on the other end of things. So I guess for her, what I'm wondering is, would it be helpful to move her away from so much cardio and into more weightlifting, or is most of the results going to come from her remaining structured with her meal plan?
Well, I will say, even myself, I'm not medicated for this, but I have subclinical hypothyroidism, which just means that my metabolism is on the low end of normal, which I've always known. No matter how hard I diet, how much training I do, I'm never going to lose more than 1 pound a week. That's kind of maximum for me. But I also know that because that that functional metabolic rate is at the lower end, it really does take some consistent cardio for me. For me to get down to my lowest point where I might want to be and maintain it, I've got to be doing some pretty high intense work almost every day. And if I'm not willing to do that much, my weight might kind of migrate up and then stay there. And that's just, you know, all the different metabolic set points we all have per our individual genetics. So, you know, always making sure that you're getting a combination of high intensity work and then just some lower intensity work. A lot of people are enthralled with high intensity because you get more bang for your buck, but that's also a lot of work on your body, your joints, and it's, you know, if you're doing, let's say, sprints and so forth, it's like leg training. You can't do that every day. So I kind of pick and choose 2 or 3 days a week of pretty high intensity work, and it may only be 15 or 20 minutes of really all out. It'd be like going out and sprinting 2 miles until you're ready to puke. Other times it might be being on an exercise bike for 30 minutes where you can read and your heart rate's only 120. That's still calories you're burning, even though it's not at a higher rate. So what I really try and pull people away from is thinking they have to do multiple sessions per day or really prolonged periods of time. So I like for people to get one training session in per day. Don't do cardio in the morning and training at night or vice versa, or 3 times a day. All of that is so non-sustainable and not appropriate for trying to have a real life, you know, with social engagement. So, you know, get it all in at once, prioritize your days, periodize your training so that you can get a really good session in every single day, whether it's weight training and cardio or just one or the other, but stagger it so that you're always recovering well. You can always do something pretty effectively. But then, Brianna, it really does come down to the consistency, like you just said. You said she really does well with some high structure until she doesn't. And I know we can all get frustrated and we can get, you know, bored maybe with progress, and then we throw our hands up. But tell me, as somebody who's entering the world of psychology, if it makes any sense at all to intentionally work counter to your goals. So, in other words, okay, I'm frustrated. I only lost half a pound this week, so I think I'll go eat 4 cheeseburgers for lunch because fuck it, I'm done. Is that is that going to help us with our goal?
Right.
But that's a reality that we deal with clients on a daily basis, and so it's so important, I think, for clients to have expectations of, you know, this is how long it's going to take you. And yes, you may not have the best genetic metabolic makeup. That's why you're here. But nobody can change that. And so let's just do the work it's going to take. If this is who you want to be, if you want to be the leanest, healthiest version of you, this is what it takes. It's no different than your financial health or your career health or your relational health. It's going to take a certain amount of work, and that just never goes away. You can't go save 2 paychecks and then say, okay, I'm done. I don't have to save any more money ever again. It just takes some ongoing commitment. And so I always tell clients, look, you know, we already talked about flexibility versus structure. Even when you're done with your goal, you've lost all the weight you want, you still have to be committed to eating well, right? I mean, look at the leanest, healthiest people around you. Do they eat nothing but crap all day? Of course not. They're lean and healthy because they're probably committed to eating pretty good food most of the time. So we can all enjoy indulgences and flexibility, but it's still within those physiological parameters of our genetic capacity. So I think you're on the tip of the spear because of your intent with psychology in your own consulting practice, and there are times I know you're going to spend an awful lot of your consulting material just on explaining these things, motivating, engaging clients in those behavioral aspects. So I see that as a very tandem thing, you know, the behavior and obviously all the nuts and bolts of nutrition. You know, it's a hard science. You can understand metabolism and macronutrients and all of that because it's just mathematical, normal physics within the makeup of your chemistry. But then we also have to address the psychological and behavioral components.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely, and with this client, I think that's going to be the key for her, because just as you were saying, how her glycogen stores will fill back up, and looking back over her data sheet, it's pretty interesting how some days she'll have, didn't track, or I was sick this day or whatever, every other week, and her weight might be dipping, and then she'll have one of those days, and now we're back at square one, and she doesn't lose that week because she's working through all of that stored glycogen, and then, we might dip a little bit back into the same load, but if she spends a day off track, we start over again. So it's the psychological component completely, it's getting her to remain consistent with her meal and with her intake.
Well, I'll kind of wrap up with this, and it goes back to the original background information you were giving me of her calorie intake and her macronutrient profile. And I will say that people who have a fear of their metabolism dropping, the best studies I've ever read show that for you to have an appreciable drop of metabolism, you need to be on a very low calorie diet, which is a medical term for 500 calories or less, for about 3 months. So never ever having more than 500 calories a day for 3 months, and then you'll see your metabolism down regulate to a point that's noticeable and appreciable, like 40% decrease. Otherwise, as you noted, we'll have days where we're dieting just fine, and then we have a little bit bigger day and a couple days fine and all this, and that's not doing anything to suppress your metabolism whatsoever. But there is something to be understood in that as we get leaner and healthier, our cardiovascular system improves because we're not carrying around as much weight. It simply takes fewer calories to function. Your basal metabolic rate goes down as you get healthier. So if I start a diet and I'm eating 2,200 calories a day, if I drop 20 pounds, I can't eat 2,200 calories a day anymore because I don't need that much to carry around that kind of extra body fat. I may now only be able to eat 1,900 calories a day. So all of a sudden we feel wounded and hurt, right? Like I can't eat as much anymore. Well, you can if you want to gain that 20 pounds back,